The condo board had a lawyer. They had a binder 3 inches thick, and they had 17 years of minutes, bylaws, and amendments that nobody had ever actually read. What they didn't have was a reason, not a real one. Nadia Osei-Chambers had bought Unit 4B at 1140 Birchmount Road in Scarborough on a Tuesday in March, when the snow was still gray along the curbs and the maple out front hadn't decided yet whether it was going to survive the winter. She paid in full, no mortgage, no conditions. She signed the papers at a folding table in the lawyer's office on Lawrence Avenue, while her daughter Kezia, no, not Kezia, that name was gone, filed away. While her daughter waited in the car reading a library book, and she drove home that afternoon with a set of keys on a plain silver ring, and she didn't tell anyone what she'd done. That was the first thing that made the neighbors suspicious. People who buy property tell people. They post photographs. They talk about square footage and transit scores and which direction the balcony faces. Nadia Osei-Chambers did none of that. She moved in on a Saturday with a rented van, 2 men she'd hired from a church bulletin board, and furniture that was neither new nor expensive but was cared for. A reading chair with worn armrests, bookshelves that went up before the bed frame came in, a kitchen table that had clearly belonged to someone else before it belonged to her. The woman in 4A watched from her doorway. Her name was Phyllis Garnett, 63 years old, retired from something in municipal records, and she had lived in the building for 11 years, and considered that a form of ownership. She watched Nadia direct the 2 men up the stairwell with the precision of someone who had moved before and didn't intend to do it again. "You'll want to speak to the board," Phyllis said. "There are rules about moving days. Saturday is listed as an approved moving day," Nadia said, not stopping. 9 to 5. "It's in the bylaws." Page 7. Phyllis closed her door. The second thing that made people suspicious was the hours Nadia kept. She left early, before 6 most mornings, and returned after dark, sometimes carrying folders, sometimes carrying nothing at all. She didn't make noise. She didn't have parties. She put her recycling in the correct bin, and she held the lobby door for people, and she said good morning to those who said it to her first. But she didn't explain herself. In buildings like 1140 Birchmount, in subdivisions like this one, where the unit started at $450,000, and the condo fees were $800 a month, and the lobby had been renovated twice in a decade, people expected a certain kind of transparency. Not openness, exactly. Not warmth, just the willingness to be legible, to fit the understood shape of who was supposed to live here. Nadia Osei-Chambers did not fit that shape, and she didn't seem to know it, and what made it worse was that she didn't seem to care. She had grown up in Brampton, the second of 4 children, parents who had come from Ghana with degrees that weren't recognized here and had rebuilt anyway. Her father driving transit for 22 years, her mother working at a dry cleaner's until she could open her own. Nadia had watched them do all of it without complaint and without credit, and she had taken from that a very specific understanding of how the world worked and what you were and weren't owed. She had worked in tax law for 19 years. Not a partner, not a name on the door. A senior associate at a firm downtown who understood exactly how money moved through structures and exactly how to keep it from leaking. She was 44 years old. She was precise. She was quiet. She had bought this unit because it was the least expensive available in a building within walking distance of the school where her daughter Adan, 12 years old, serious-faced, obsessed with weather systems and competitive chess, attended classes. She had not bought it to impress anyone. That, it turned out, was a problem. The first letter came 6 weeks after she moved in, slipped under her door on a Tuesday, on letterhead from the Birchmount Gardens Condominium Corporation, signed by the board president, a man named Leonard Price. The letter noted, with formal courtesy, that the board had received concerns from residents regarding a number of matters. The hours of the moving day had apparently extended to 5:17 rather than 5 o'clock. A structure on the balcony of 4B required review, and the board would appreciate her attendance at the next monthly meeting. Nadia read it twice. The structure on the balcony was a wooden planter box, 18 inches wide, which she had built herself from cedar boards on a Saturday afternoon while Adan sat inside doing homework. It held 3 varieties of tomato, basil, and a climbing bean that was making very optimistic progress up a small trellis. She had checked the bylaws before building it. Section 9, paragraph 4. Balcony structures were permitted, provided they did not obstruct sightlines, drainage, or fire egress. Her planter did none of those things. She went to the meeting. Leonard Price was 68, retired from something in finance, and had the manner of a man who had been told he was reasonable so many times that he had stopped checking whether it was true. He sat at the head of the folding table in the third-floor common room and welcomed Nadia with a smile that didn't reach his eyes and gestured to the single chair placed on the opposite side of the table from the board members. There were 4 other people on the board. Phyllis Garnett was among them. The meeting lasted an hour and 40 minutes. Leonard raised the moving day infraction. 17 minutes, he said, which had inconvenienced a resident who needed the elevator. He raised the planter box, which he said created a precedent. He raised very carefully the matter of community standards and the character of the building and the expectations of long-term residents. Nadia took notes. She did not argue. She did not raise her voice. She asked, with precise politeness, for the specific bylaw provision that the planter box violated. Leonard said it wasn't about specific provisions. It was about the spirit of the community. She asked for the definition of community standards as it appeared in the corporation's governing documents. Leonard said that was being technical about things that were better handled in the spirit of neighborliness. "I'm happy to be a good neighbor," Nadia said. "Could you tell me what that would look like, specifically?" The meeting ended without resolution. She drove home, picked up Adan from the neighbor who had been watching her, and made jollof rice for dinner because it was a Tuesday, and Tuesday was jollof. Adan asked how the meeting went. Nadia said it went fine. Adan, who was 12 and perceptive, looked at her mother for a long moment and then said, "Did they try to bother you about the tomatoes again?" "They tried," Nadia said. "Did it work?" "It never works," Nadia said. Adan nodded and reached for the rice. The second letter came 3 weeks later. This one included a formal notice of bylaw infraction, citing a provision she hadn't seen cited before. Section 12, paragraph 9, subsection C, regarding alterations to common building aesthetics as observed from exterior vantage points. The planter box, the letter argued, was visible from the street, and therefore fell under this provision. Attached was a citation schedule. The first fine was $250. Nadia read the provision. She read it again. She looked up the amendment history of Section 12 in the building's registered documents, which she had obtained from the city's online property registry the week after the first meeting. Because she was a tax lawyer, and obtaining documents was what she did before other things became necessary. Section 12, paragraph 9. Subsection C had been added in 2019. She cross-referenced the board minutes from that year. The amendment had been proposed by Leonard Price and seconded by Phyllis Garnett. It had been passed at a meeting attended by 5 residents, 3 of whom were on the board. She pulled up the Condominium Act. She spent the better part of a Thursday evening in her reading chair, the one with the worn armrests, with the act on her laptop and a notepad beside her, and a cup of tea that went cold. Adan appeared once, saw the expression on her mother's face, quietly retrieved the cold tea and replaced it with a hot one, and said nothing. By 11 o'clock, Nadia had a list. Section 12, paragraph 9, subsection C was valid. The fine was within the board's authority. She was not going to win that argument. but the bylaw itself had been passed in violation of the notice requirements under the Act. The amendment had required 30 days' notice to all unit owners before a vote. The minutes showed the notice period had been 19 days. The registered amendment was therefore procedurally invalid and had been for 6 years, and the board had been issuing fines under a provision that had no legal standing. She did not send a letter. She did not go to another meeting. She contacted the Condominium Authority of Ontario and filed a complaint. She also wrote, in her own name, to the 3 unit owners she had managed to identify as having received fines under Section 12 in the last 4 years. She explained the situation. She offered to help them file claims for restitution. 2 of them wrote back within a week. Leonard Price received the CAO notification on a Friday afternoon. Nadia knew this because Phyllis, who had apparently not learned that open hallway conversations carry, told someone on the second floor about it, in a voice that made the words completely out of order, audible through a closed door. The board hired a lawyer. It cost them money from the reserve fund. Nadia knew this too, because she had requested the last 3 years of financial statements from the property management company, which she was entitled to as a unit owner, and she went through them on a Sunday morning while Adan was at chess practice, and she found 3 other things while she was there. An irregular maintenance contract, an administrative fee structure that wasn't disclosed in the annual meeting summary, and a reserve fund study that hadn't been updated in 7 years, which was itself a violation of the Act. She added them to the list. What happened next did not happen quickly. Nothing in the legal world happens quickly, and Nadia had lived in it long enough to know that speed is usually the enemy of precision. The CAO process took 5 months. During those 5 months, she went to work each day, picked up Adan from chess practice twice a week, made dinner, helped with homework on the weather unit, attended one school concert, where Adan played recorder in a way that suggested the recorder might not be her instrument, and watered the planter box on the balcony because the tomatoes were coming in and she wasn't going to let them go to seed over a procedural dispute. She did not remove the planter box. She did not pay the fine. The neighbors noticed. Not all of them, and not all in the same way. Mrs. Okonkwo from the second floor stopped her in the lobby one morning and asked, quietly, what she had found in the financial statements. Nadia told her. Mrs. Okonkwo was 67 and had lived in the building for 8 years and had always found the fees a little higher than they should be and had never known why. A man named Boyd Atsante, who lived in 2C and worked in construction and had been in the building 4 years, came to her door one evening with a folder of his own. Letters from the board going back to his first month about a parking variance that had never been properly resolved. He had never known there was a process to challenge it. He hadn't known what he was entitled to. Nadia made tea, and they sat at the kitchen table that had belonged to someone else before it belonged to her, and she went through the documents with him the same way she'd have done it for a client, except she didn't charge him anything, because this was her building too, and she was tired of people not knowing what they were owed. The board's lawyer sent a response to the CAO complaint in month 3. It was long and technical and argued, with some creativity, that the notice period provision had been substantially met in spirit, and that the intent of the Act was not to invalidate good faith governance. Nadia read it on a Tuesday night, noted the 3 provisions it had mischaracterized, wrote a brief and detailed response, and attached appendices. Leonard Price's name appeared in the management company's contract as a personal reference for the owner of the maintenance company. The maintenance company had been awarded contracts without competitive bids for 9 consecutive years. She added it to the list. By month 4, she had been joined in the CAO filing by 2 other unit owners. By month 5, a third, the property management company, which had been copied on the CAO correspondence, quietly informed the board that they were reviewing their relationship with the corporation. The hearing was on a Thursday in November. Adan was at school. The CAO adjudicator was a careful, methodical person who asked precise questions and took careful notes and did not appear to be impressed by anyone. Leonard Price's lawyer made a good argument. Nadia presented her case without a lawyer, which she had considered carefully and decided was more efficient, since she was the lawyer, and she laid it out in the order she had built it: the amendment, the notice period, the cases, the fines, the financial irregularities, the maintenance contracts, the reserve fund. She did not raise her voice. She did not use the word unfair. She used the word violation 11 times and attached a document for every instance. The adjudicator issued a preliminary finding 4 weeks later. Section 12, paragraph 9. Subsection C was declared procedurally invalid. All fines issued under it since 2019 were to be repaid with interest. The management company contract was referred for further review. The reserve fund study was ordered updated within 90 days. Leonard Price resigned from the board before the new year. Phyllis Garnett did not resign. She sat in the lobby on a Friday afternoon and watched Nadia come in from work, and there was a long moment where neither of them said anything, and then Phyllis said, "You could have just come and talked to us." Nadia stopped. She thought about the chair across the table from the board. The 17 minutes. The word aesthetics. The year the amendment had been passed and who had seconded it. "I came to the meeting," she said. She went upstairs. The planter box was still on the balcony. The tomatoes were done for the season. She had already put the basil to seed and stored it in small envelopes labeled in her handwriting, 3 varieties, and a note about soil acidity that she'd figured out in the 2nd month. The climbing bean had wound itself tight around the trellis and gone brown and dormant and was waiting for spring with the particular patience of things that have already proven they can grow. Adan was at the table when she came in, chess board set up, running through a problem she'd printed from a tournament website. She looked up. "How did it go?" "It went the way it was going to go," Nadia said. "Which way was that?" Nadia put her bag down. She looked at the planter box through the glass of the balcony door. "The right way," she said. Boyd Asante got his parking variance corrected. Mrs. Okonkwo received check in February for $340, which was the sum of fines she'd paid over 6 years under provisions similar to the one that had been invalidated. She framed the letter from the CAO. Not the check, the letter, because it said in official language what she had known for years and never been able to prove. 2 new members joined the condo board in the February election. One was Boyd. The other was a woman from the 5th floor who worked in public health and had very clear opinions about the reserve fund study. The first thing the new board did was commission a full financial audit and open the maintenance contracts to competitive bidding. Nadia did not join the board. She was asked. She declined politely and went to the first meeting of the new board as a resident and sat in one of the regular chairs and listened. And when Boyd called her name to recognize her contribution to the process, she shook her head slightly, and he understood and moved on to the next item. She was a person who did what needed doing and then went home. On a Saturday in April, the maple out front finally finished deciding that it was going to survive and put out the particular bright green of new leaves that only lasts about a week before it deepens into summer. Adan stood on the balcony in her socks, which Nadia had told her twice was not a good idea, and looked at it. "Did you know maples can live for 300 years?" Adan said. "I did not know that. That one's probably about 60. She considered it. "So it's got a long way to go." Nadia looked at her daughter. At the planter box, soil turned and ready, the seed envelopes lined up inside on the windowsill, waiting for the last frost date. At the tree. "Yes," she said, "it does." She went inside to start dinner, and the door to the balcony stayed open, and the spring came in.